Hey, welcome back. I'm Aspiringspike. We are returning to Pioneer for the first time in a couple months. I've been playing a lot in Modern with the new companions, and I've been really impressed with Mishra's Bauble plus Lurrus in a ton of different Modern shells. So I wanted to see if I could find something similar to do to Mishra's Bauble plus Lurrus in Pioneer, and I found Unbridled Growth. This is a 1-mana enchantment that enchants a land that makes it tap for any color, and you can sacrifice it to draw a card. So with Lurrus, for 1 mana every turn, you just get to draw an extra card, which has been really powerful for me so far. Not only does it draw a card with Lurrus, but it also triggers Revolt for Fatal Push, and triggering Revolt on Fatal Push has been a really difficult thing in Pioneer, and this deck is probably the best Fatal Push deck I've ever played. We're also playing 2 Soul Guide Lantern, which is kind of similar to Unbridled Growth, and that lets you draw cards every turn with Lurrus, although this one requires 2 mana to do so. So I think I like playing more Growths than Lanterns, but the Graveyard Hate is very relevant in Pioneer, and I like playing 2 of these. I'm playing 1 Mox Amber. I think you never mind really drawing the first one, because you always have Lurrus in your opening hand, and you have, I believe, 10 1-mana black spells to be able to go on turn 3 Lurrus, Mox Amber, and then play one of these black spells. You never want to draw 2. I think you only really ever want to play 1 copy of this card, but it's been pretty good so far, and I've liked having access to it. It's just never going to be dead because you always have a legendary creature in your hand in Lurrus. Moving on from there, of course, 4 Thoughtseize, 4 Fatal Push, just kind of a staple of these black-green decks. Really happy being able to play these super efficient spells. And again, I touched on this earlier, but this is probably the best Fatal Push deck I've ever played. We're playing 2 Deadweight in the main deck and 2 in the side. I do think creature removal is really good in this current format. There are a ton of Lurrus decks. There are a ton of Black-White Aura decks. The Heliod combo is still popular. And being able to Deadweight over and over again with Lurrus is pretty powerful. It's not quite Punishing Fire, Grove of the Burned Willows. It's not quite Seal of Fire, but it's pretty powerful. So I've liked having access to 2 in the main deck and then being able to go up to the full 4 post board. I do think Abrupt Decay is really good in the format again. There was a while where it wasn't great, like when Inverter was super popular and they weren't playing Jace Vryn's Prodigy, but now they're playing Jace Vryn's Prodigy, and you actually have a good target for Abrupt Decay in those matchups. 1 Agonizing Remorse kind of as the 5th Thoughtseize. I could see playing even the 6th copy. I think I want 5 discard spells in the main deck. And I've liked the 1 Remorse instead of like a main deck Duress. We're also playing 4 Grim Flayer, and I've played Grim Flayer in these kind of decks in the past, and I've always liked the card. But Grim Flayer is, in the past I've played Grim Flayer, and it's just a good 2-drop. If it gets Delirious, it gets Delirious, but Delirium is on very often in this deck, with Unbridled Growth being an enchantment that goes to the graveyard, Deadweight also being an enchantment. We've got cheap sorceries and instants, we've got artifacts that go to the graveyard, we've got lands that go to the graveyard. Grim Flayer is very often, a 4/4, 2-mana trampler. Really powerful. 3 Scavenging Ooze, this card is really strong in Pioneer. One of the best 2-drops, but can be awkward in multiples, so we're only playing 3 copies. 3 Chevills, and this is a new card from Ikora. Kind of weird, it's a 2-mana legendary creature, 1/3 Death Touch. At the beginning of your upkeep, if your opponent controls no permanents with bounty counters on them, you put a bounty counter on a target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls, and then whenever a permanent an opponent controls with a bounty counter on it dies, you gain 3 life and draw a card. I have been very impressed with this card. I do think that it is well positioned right now because I think creature removal is really good, and I think that's one of the reasons to play this deck. I really like this card. I started with 2, I went up to 3, and I hope to get to showcase it today. We're playing 2 Call of the Death Dweller, another new card from Ikora. All you're really trying to do with this card is rebuy your Lurrus when it dies. You can buy one of these back, and that's fine. But for the most part, you just want to get Lurrus back because you're pretty in on Lurrus in this deck, and so you want to be able to get it back when your opponent kills it. I tried, instead of Call of the Death Dweller, Omen of Death. because I thought it was really cool that Omen of Death could be cast from the graveyard with Lurrus. But that ended up not being very relevant because any card that you could get back with Omen of Death, you could just cast from the graveyard with Lurrus anyways. So I started with Call of the Death Dweller, I switched to Omen of Death, and now I'm back on Call of the Death Dweller, and I think that this is the better of the two cards. 3 Heroes Downfall, kind of topping out the curve. I think this is an excellent removal spell in the format, although we would rather play Murderous Rider in this shell, but you can't because of Lurrus's deck building restriction. So that's the main deck. Let's go ahead and get into the sideboard. Playing 2 Deadweight in the sideboard, already talked about this, but Deadweight is not always on in every matchup, so I don't like to have the full 4 copies in the main deck, but I definitely like having access to the full 4 against the small creature decks. Lurrus plus Deadweight is back-breaking for a lot of strategies, so I think having access to the full 4 in the 75 is very important. For Duress, a card that I think is decently well positioned in the current format, at least as a sideboard card. It helps us a lot in our bad matchups against blue-white control, Jeskai Fires, very good against Lotus Breach, a card we bring in against Inverter. And just the fact that it's 1 mana in a deck that has so many other cheap spells, you just want to get your hand empty and start drawing cards with Lurrus and trading 1-for-1 very cheaply. And Duress is very good at doing that. So I like having the full 4 in the sideboard. Playing 2 Lost Legacy. This is mostly for the Inverter matchup. It's one of the few cards that is actually good against Inverter. Just stops their combo dead, name Inverter of Truth, and they're done comboing. Also comes in against Lotus Breach, and, you know, there are other combo decks you can bring it in against. 3 Ratchet Bomb might look weird, and it definitely is. But Black-White Auras is the most popular deck in Pioneer right now. Lurrus was a really, really big addition to that deck. And while it might seem like we have a great matchup with all of these Deadweights and other removal spells, I found that they sideboard in the 2-mana 2/1 protection from black creature, which this deck can just not beat without a card like Ratchet Bomb. So because Black-White Auras is so popular, I like having access to 3 Ratchet Bombs just to kill that card. Notably, Ratchet Bomb I think is also good against the Hardened Scales deck, and I think it's good against the Ensoul Artifact deck, and maybe Mono Black aggro too. And you can just replay it with Lurrus, kind of does an Engineered Explosives impression. Playing 2 Damping Sphere for the Lotus Field matchup. Lotus Breach, Lotus Field, very, very powerful. Probably the best deck in the format in the hands of the right player, and I think you need to be prepared for it right now. And I think that we are with 2 Spheres, 2 Legacies, 4 Duress, and Tormod's Crypt, which comes in that matchup. I like it against Inverter. I like having access to 1 against the Sultai decks. You know, I think we need, you know, a little less sideboard graveyard hate because we're already main decking Soul Guide Lantern and Scavenging Ooze, but I think the first copy is pretty good. So that is the deck. I currently plan on streaming this tomorrow in tomorrow's Pioneer Challenge over on twitch.tv/Aspiringspike. Hope to see you guys there. You can hit the subscribe button. You can follow me on Twitter, yada, yada, yada. Let's just play some games. Okay, so we are on the draw for match 1. Got a nice hand with double Thoughtseize against a Jingatha deck. So probably 5-color Nif Mizzet. Could maybe be a sweet Jeskai Ascendancy deck. I've kind of tried to mess around with those style of decks, and I haven't really figured it out quite yet. I just like how close Blooming Marsh and this art of Woodland Cemetery look. I feel like whenever I have these 2 cards, I confuse the 2. Okay, very interesting. Our opponent is playing Spirits that I guess Jingatha is just free in. I'm going to take this Rattle Chains, and then we can probably just get Deadweight plus Lurrus going, and that's going to be really strong in this matchup. If they top deck another Rattle Chains, things go poorly, but feeling okay. We can even just Thoughtseize first, just in case they do draw Rattle Chains. They drew a Supreme Phantom, which can't be dead-weighted, but we can still deadweight the Spectral Sailor, and then Thoughtseize the Herald, and then our opponent doesn't have spells in their hand, and we'll see if they have spells on the top of their deck. Not too worried about this 5 mana 5/5, although I guess it is pretty big. They did shock in this Temple Garden. I mean, if they just, you know, start ripping spell after spell, that is usually a good way to beat a Thoughtseize deck. Lurrus is actually kind of nice just having lifelink here. I think we just play Lurrus. And we just need our opponent to brick on a spell, or yeah, we need them to draw a land this turn, I think. Most spirits, I think, with Double Lord out, are going to probably be good enough for them to beat us with, and they shock in Temple Garden. So that kind of means they're telling us that they drew Eagle into Coco, which is not beatable. Not really. I guess we could go, like, draw Fatal Push, Unbridled Growth, draw another Fatal Push. I am going to Growth first. I'm going to do my best to play around a Coco. Alright, I'm going to just go to combat. I guess if they did draw Collected Company, they could whiff. Could also be kind of a bluff shock. No, they did draw Eagle into Coco. Pretty sick. Into Double Lord. Okay, let's go to game 2. Cannot Thoughtseize the top of the deck. I do think I want the full 4 deadweights in this matchup. Ratchet Bomb actually seems pretty good to me. I think we want all of them. Call of the Death Dweller, the opponent doesn't have removal that actually kills creatures, so like this card really is just here to rebuy Lurrus, and since we can't rebuy Lurrus, I don't think we want it. Chevill looks great in this matchup. I think we can cut the Agonizing Remorse, and maybe these Soul Guide Lanterns. I think I like that. And let's go to game 2. For game 2, I wish that there was an auto reveal option for these companions. I know it's like kind of the smallest thing ever to complain about, I guess, but getting a little tired of clicking every turn. Don't have a untapped black source on turn 1, but we can, you know, settle for double Thoughtseize on turn 2 maybe. I think this hand does look pretty good to me. Our opponent doesn't have a 1-drop for us to Thoughtseize anyways. Mausoleum Wanderer, I guess, would have been pretty dangerous. Ooh, so this is kind of interesting. Let me go ahead and lead on Thoughtseize, but if there's nothing else we really want to Thoughtseize this turn, we can just cast Unbridled Growth, and next turn go Lurrus Mox Thoughtseize. Yeah, like here, our opponent only has 1 2-drop, so I kind of like the idea of just taking the Supreme Phantom, putting the Growth on the Swamp, and then, you know, casting this Thoughtseize next turn. Alongside the Lurrus, of course. And just having Lurrus in play with Unbridled Growth is very strong. Just very strong. We're probably going to Thoughtseize the I don't know, Deputy of Detention seems kind of fine. I actually think we just want to take this Coco. Yeah. Just take the Coco. If they spend their turn casting the Deputy, we just have an answer for it. Looks like they are going to decide to hold up Spell Queller instead. So let me go ahead and start off by sacking Unbridled Growth. It's not a bad draw. And then recasting the Unbridled Growth and see if this gets them to cast their Spell Queller. Looks like it will, and then now we can downfall the Spell Queller. Get our Unbridled Growth back, and we also get to cast the Thoughtseize. Really nice to have a good, Yeah, I think that just the first Mox Amber is pretty free in this deck, but any additional copies kind of can get wonky. Guess we have to take this Coco. Don't currently have an answer to that Deputy now that we've used our Downfall, but you know, we get to draw a card off the Growth. We've got a Grim Flayer, which will be Delirious after we sack the Growth. I think we're okay. Just them resolving a bunch of Cocos seems like the way for them to get back into the game. We have just so many answers to this too, just in the deck. Does turn off our Mox. I think I'm gonna float a green, sack the Unbridled Growth, play Unbridled Growth, sack it again. And I guess we're just on double Grim Flayer, which are both, you know, 2 mana 4/4 tramplers and have a pretty relevant ability. The only spell we know our opponent has Imperium Eagle and a mystery card. They only have 2 Cocos left in their deck. I guess they do have Jingatha, which is pretty big. 5/5 is bigger than 4/4, I suppose. Haven't checked my math yet. Wanderer is probably one of the best things that could have happened for us, and they're also casting a kind of a weird blue-green at sorcery speed is weird. So it looks like they mint to tap white and they're going to cast an Imperium Eagle, which is fine. We can attack through an Eagle here, and they can't attack with their Deputy. It's not the worst draw. It does turn on our Mox. That's kind of interesting. Let's go ahead and attack. Don't think our opponent has any good blocks. There's a Fatal Push and a Scavenging Ooze. You guys can see the cards. Kind of like both of these. Oh, damn it. Well, sorry, I messed up the triggers. Guess we get to see a few more cards with this one. I would have liked for an Ooze to be underneath the Fatal Push. We do get to activate Castle Locthwain though. Now that the Mox is on, we get to put a bounty counter on one of our opponent's creatures, and then we probably get to Fatal Push, you know, whatever creature we choose. Feeling pretty good. Interesting. Well, we're definitely going to put the bounty counter on the Selfless Spirit. Although this is, you know, going to be, I think, pretty good at just, if they just don't attack and then they wait for us to predictably kill their Selfless Spirit. Because I think they can infer we left a removal spell on top. They have pretty good blocks after they sacrifice. They don't have very good blocks, I think, if they attack here, so I'm pretty happy if they attack. This just lets us trample over. Yeah, they reassess and they agree with my take. Right, let's go ahead and put a bounty counter on Selfless Spirit. One thing I forgot to talk about in the deck tech is when I first built this deck, I was playing a copy of, oh interesting, they're going to make the Selfless Spirit hexproof so it doesn't get a bounty counter. But it doesn't. This card does not play very well with Heartless Act, which puts a counter on the creature. Then you can't kill the creature with Heartless Act, which was pretty interesting to discover. Okay, I'm gonna play this. I'm just gonna tick it up now. And then on my opponent's upkeep, I'm going to kill this Selfless Spirit. We've got to get that out of the way. Could maybe just send in with a Grim Flayer. It's going to trade for something. Yeah, I think just, you know, saying we'll sacrifice Grim Flayer for, like, either, you know, if they double block, then it's going to be trading for the Fatal Push, because they'll sack with the Selfless Spirit. Maybe it was better to attack first. Okay, I would much rather kill this Rattle Chain, so we'll order the blockers like this. Okay. And then I would rather get Lurrus back and have them keep their Selfless Spirit, but I think they're going to sack their Selfless Spirit. But it doesn't really matter, I think, either way. Yeah. I think this was the only outcome. Kind of a weird turn. Should have definitely attacked before we sacked the Ratchet Bomb. I like trading off a Grim Flayer there. We just have the inevitable long game, and just if they can like top deck a Coco into double Lord, that's how we lose. I think I'm going to put the counter on this Mausoleum Wanderer. I know it would be better to get this Ratchet Bomb up to 3, but I think I like just getting the card draw rolling right now while we can. So let's go ahead and sacrifice the Ratchet Bomb. Draw a card, gain 3 life. Just go ahead and cycle Unbridled Growth too. Could maybe have tried to Grim Flayer and then drawn into whatever we Grim Flayer into. I think we're okay. I'm also okay trading Lurrus for Deputy of Detention here. We can keep the Scavenging Ooze on top. It'll be good if they like just cast Jingotha next turn and we need a big creature. We cannot Castle Locthwain into Ooze. I'll just play the Flayer. Play Blooming Marsh tapped. And pass. Interesting. So they're not going to cast Jingotha, which means they must have drawn like Collected Company. I'll put a counter on the Eagle. This way it's good if either creature dies for us. So like they don't really have like a good block with either one. I'm going to send them the Grim Flayers and make them cast their Company or their Herald, whichever one they drew. I suppose we can attack with this guy too. This attacking with this guy forces them to block, and I guess it is kind of bad for us if they put Herald on Chevill, but even if they do that, they still have to lose one of these two to the Grim Flayer, and we either get 3 life in a card or we get Lurrus back. So kind of a weird game. The Ratchet Bombs looked maybe a little too slow. I think it's still going to be fine. Seems better than our other options. Let's go ahead and just resubmit and try for match 3 or game 3. This is my first time playing this matchup. I think I've played 3 leagues with the deck. I've got, I believe, a 3-2, a 4-1, and then my last league with like this exact 75 was a 5-0 where I didn't drop a game. This is a really weird hand on the draw. We do have triple 1 mana black. Yeah, I think we just have to keep this. We can cycle Unbridled Growth if we miss. I know this is a tap land. We're not unlikely to even draw a land. We're likely to draw a land in the top 2. We have 3 really cheap interactive spells on the draw, which is good in this matchup. Our opponent has a Spectral Sailor in their hand. This shock means. And we did draw a land, which is very nice. So, like, obviously lucky to immediately draw the land, but I think this hand had a high enough upside to go for that. I'm going to take this Rattle Chains. And I do put a pretty high value on hands with Deadweight Fatal Push against spirits. Opponent drew this Hallowed Fountain, and now they're playing it tapped for the turn. Let's go ahead and just get Ratchet Bomb down. So now if they draw Mausoleum Wanderer, it's pretty awkward. They can't really cast it this turn. I'm kind of interested in just getting this up to 3. We'll see what happens. There's the Eagle we know about. There's the Fortress we know about. So their hand is basic Plains, Mystery card, and they also have Jengatha that they can play. So there's the missed land drop. I'm going to go ahead and Unbridled Growth on my Swamp. I'm just going to sacrifice it. If we draw a land, we can maybe Decay the Eagle. And if we miss, we can just Fatal Push because now we have Revolt. So I'm just going to Decay the Eagle right now. And then Ratchet Bomb away the Sailor, actually, because I don't want them to start to be able to draw cards. So not a very efficient removal spell, but I do think it is good to not let them draw cards when they're kind of low on resources here. They drew double Wanderer, so if we can, you know, Lurrus back Ratchet Bomb, maybe that'll be good, but I guess we'd probably just rather just Lurrus back Deadweight. So let me play Lurrus, and then I think I just want to get value off my Lurrus this turn. We can take a hit and replay Unbridled Growth. Lurrus having lifelink is so good. This card is incredibly pushed. It's just, you know, it feels like every deck and every format is playing it these days, but I've really enjoyed playing with Lurrus, and I may be bored of it in a month or two, but right now the games are really interesting to me. There's their free 5-mana 5/5. I'm trying to think if there's any card that they lose by playing this. I can't really think of any. It seems pretty free. It's not great, but it is free. Alright, so I'm going to Deadweight, and then play Chevill. I feel like I've been pronouncing this card differently every time I play it. I'll pretty happily just, you know, block my Death Toucher on their 5/5 and be done with it. The double Deadweight was super nice too. We don't have a ton of cards that actually kill Jengatha outright. It's really just Hero's Downfall. But our opponent has had enough. I bet they just drew a land there. Alright, deck looked powerful. Deck looked good. I will see you guys for round number 2. Okay, so recording messed up for this match, but I think that if there was any match for it to mess up for, it was this one. Playing against Lotus Breach, and we kept a hand with 3 removal spells, and I was pretty sure that we were going to be, you know, dead to rights, but we did draw, you know, Unbridled Growth into Soul Guide Lantern, started doing some cantripping, and they even played a Vizier for us to kill. Sack the Lantern, trigger Revolt, kill the Vizier, and, you know, after turn 4, we realized that they've seen a lot of cards with their cantrips, but they still haven't seen a Lotus Breach. We get to play Lurrus, we get to rebuy Soul Guide Lantern and have some graveyard hate in play for Underworld Breach and pass. They do some more cantripping, and they are still they're casting Pour Over the Pages without Lotus Field in play, but then they discard Lotus Field, so we can infer that they found one off of the Pour. We untap, we play, I think it's good to exile your opponent's graveyard aggressively with Soul Guide Lantern in this matchup, because their deck is pretty good at just killing you after you exile their graveyard in response to an Underworld Breach. I think that you need to already have their graveyard exiled in order to, like, have Soul Guide Lantern be enough hate against Underworld Breach specifically. I've lost game after game where I Tormod's Crypt in response to Underworld Breach and they just kill me anyways. So I think that this is a better way to hedge against their combo than trying to draw cards with Unbridled Growth instead. And so my opponent casts 2 Hidden Strings, and they have 12 mana, which is enough to Fave Wishes for Ugin the Spirit Dragon. But we, thankfully, could Fatal Push our own Lurrus, and then let Ugin's ability resolve, get Lurrus back with Call of the Death Dweller, Fatal Push the Ugin, and then have a Soul Guide Lantern in play to be able to exile our opponent's graveyard, just in case they Underworld Breach us. It is possible that we wanted to hold up Fatal Push for our opponent's Fave Wishes instead, but our opponent, instead of going for Fave Wishes, they decide to play Blast Zone and put some counters to kill Lurrus on the Blast Zone. The menace that Call of the Death Dweller gives Lurrus coming in pretty clutch here, because they can't just chump block the Grazer. We get in for 3 more points of damage. We saw that they just had Hidden Strings in their hand off the Thoughtseize, but they also had Sheltered Thicket to cycle into. I think our opponent should not have played out the Grazer and the Island. I think it was a mistake for them to do that, because I think they probably wanted to discard those cards to Fave Wishes and find something else good. Also, our opponent waited until our turn to crack the Blast Zone, so we got to draw an extra card off of Unbridled Growth, which came in pretty clutch. And then we found a threat in Grim Flayer, and we double dead-weighted Arboreal Grazer, which is not great value, but it's something you gotta do. Kind of crazy that we even got to cast the deadweights in this matchup. They just cast Fave Wishes, and I spent some time debating on whether or not we wanted to Fatal Push next turn in response to them activating Fave Wishes, but with drawing the second Grim Flayer, I just wanted to put them dead next turn. And they did not draw a Pour Over the Pages, and we won the game. So that was game 1. Let's go ahead and go to game 2. The sideboarding for game 2 is not recorded in these replays, but I cut the 4 Fatal Push, 2 Deadweights, the 3 Chevilles for 4 Duress, 1 Tormod's Crypt, 2 Lost Legacy, and 2 Damping Spheres. And I was pretty happy with the results. I think this matchup is abysmal game 1, so it makes sense to have 9 cards to bring in for games 2 and 3. Our hand is pretty solid. We've got Thoughtseize and Graveyard Hate, and Unbridled Growth to draw a card every turn with Lurrus. We even draw our Damping Sphere on turn 2, which is really nice. So I take my opponent's Blink of an Eye with the second Thoughtseize, so they can't bounce our Damping Sphere. It was also really weird. My opponent could have played Grazer on turn 1, and they chose not to. It didn't really end up punishing them super badly, but it was kind of strange. I decided to wait on the Damping Sphere just because they're so low on resources, and they don't even have a Lotus Field yet. And then Damping Sphere does stop us from drawing extra cards with Lurrus. Our opponent just keeps spinning their wheels. They finally find their Lotus Field. They put it into play. They pass it back to us after copying their Lotus Field. And then I spent some time debating on what to do here. I went ahead and attacked first. And I decided if they would block like this, I would just Hero's Downfall to Fave Wishes, which would turn on Delirium for the Grim Flayer. Then we'll have a pretty quick clock, and we'll have a Damping Sphere going forward. We even have a Graveyard Hate for an Underworld Breach in play with Soul Guide Lantern. Spend some time on the Grim Flayer. I decided to leave Thoughtseize on top to cycle into, and then play the Damping Sphere. And I think our opponents had enough either this turn or next turn. But I guess this turn I go Lurrus plus replay Soul Guide Lantern, and they concede to that. So sorry about the recording. We'll keep live commentary for the rest of this league. But this was kind of a log match, and if the recording was going to fail on any of the matches, I'm kind of glad it was this one. So we are on the draw for match number 3 against the Lurrus deck. We keep this hand. Nice to have all of our mana come into play on taps. Nice to have Fatal Push against the Lurrus decks. The most common Lurrus deck at the moment is Black-White Auras. It could be something else. I wonder. Our opponent, is saying that they are a fan in chat. I wonder if they saw this list I posted on Twitter. Just gonna hold up Fatal Push. Could be a brew of their own. We'll see what's going on. I have seen some Abzan, Lurrus, Rally the Ancestor decks popping up recently. This could be that. Oh, it's Scales. I probably should have been able to read Scales, but wouldn't have changed our play. I'm still pretty used to Modern. Flooding out just a little bit here. Hopefully this Grim Flayer can help with that. Be pretty sad if it dies. Hero's Downfall is interesting. Let's cast the Downfall this turn. It's the less efficient spell. Decay should kill basically everything anyways. I don't think I want to draw Thoughtseize. I'm just going to put all these in the graveyard. We're still one card type away from, turning this Delirious, but we'll see what happens. Also, haven't found anything for Lurrus to buy back yet. They play their own Lurrus. Thankfully, we do have a Decay for that. That's a very good draw. So I'm going to Decay their Lurrus. Not that I necessarily think that they would block, but I want my Grim Flayer to connect, and I want to kill Lurrus anyways. Interesting. So I wouldn't mind drawing the Scavenging Ooze, but I think that, especially because we have the second Grim Flayer, I just want to put it in my graveyard. And even if we draw a land next turn, we can play Lurrus and replay Scavenging Ooze, so I think we definitely want to put it in the yard. I feel pretty good now that our opponent's Lurrus is dead. Yeah, Hangerback Walker not doing a ton here. Probably get in for 8 this turn. Even have a Call of the Death Dwellers in our hand to rebuy Lurrus if they kill it with a Walking Ballista or something. Could maybe mill over something with Grim Flayer that makes us want to cast the Call, but I doubt there's anything we'd want to play over Lurrus this turn. So I'm going to put Unbridled Growth in the yard for sure. I think I'll put the Flayer in the yard as well. And then I'll keep this Fatal Push on top. And then, do I want to replay Scavenging Ooze or Grim Flayer? I think I want to replay the Grim Flayer. Grim Flayer is so good in this deck. Kind of the perfect card. Evolutionary Leap is a very good draw for our opponent. They get to put 3 blockers into play. They reveal a Steel Overseer, which we're going to draw a Fatal Push for. I'm going to go ahead and attack with all of my creatures. I guess I want to get value off of the front half of my Lurrus. So I guess it also won't really matter because we won't have the mana to get value off of the back half. But if they just triple block my Lurrus or double block my Lurrus, I just can call the Death Dwellers it back, and then it will get Menace, which is a pretty good keyword on this battlefield. Our opponent sees the writing on the wall and packs it up. Another good Ratchet Ball matchup. Also another good Dead Weight matchup. It's got the Soul Guide Lanterns, probably the Agonizing Remorse. I think we can also trim Grim Flayer on the draw. Maybe we don't want to cut the Lanterns because our opponent is a Lurrus deck. Let's rethink that. I actually kind of feel Hero's Downfall on the draw is a pretty inefficient removal spell. Seems like our worst removal spell by a pretty large margin. Like we're bringing in Dead Weights, we're bringing in Ratchet Bombs. I think I like cutting those. And I think I do like the Mox Amber in this matchup, although I have cut it in some matchups. Especially on the draw, seems kind of nice. Might cut it on the play. But let's run it like this and go to game 2. Double Blooming Marsh is pretty nice. Our opponent said oops. I'm not sure what the oops is for. Oh, submitted 61. Not the end of the world. We've all been there. Keeping this. 10 looks really nice. Turn 1 Hardened Scales is scary though. Don't have an Abrupt Decay for it, or a Ratchet Bomb. Not yet, at least. They have triple Hardened Scales. Jeez. Well, I guess whenever we find a Ratchet Bomb, it'll be pretty good. I'm going to take the Fatal Push. Not really too scared of this Steel Overseer yet. Let me actually deadweight the Steel Overseer and then Soul Guide Lantern it so they can't buy it back with Lurrus. I like having this in play against the Lurrus deck. And we've got to hope that, I mean, they've got a lot of really powerful draws from this point, but if we can find a Ratchet Bomb before they can find a big payoff for their scales, that'll be great for us. And let's play Chevill here. Wait, our opponent also missed their land drop, so that's good to know. 2 of their cards are Hardened Scales, and then they have 2 unknowns. But yeah, with the Fatal Push in our hand, I like getting this guy going. It's I guess bad if they draw exactly Walking Ballista, but even then it's only a 1-for-1. Heartless Act, well, that's okay. I guess we can, probably don't want to call this back just because we're a Lurrus deck. We'd rather Lurrus it back. So we'll play Lurrus here. Nice with the deadweight in our graveyard. That stops a lot of our opponent's things. When we have Call of the Death Dweller to get Lurrus back if they have removal, and they do have removal. So we sack this, draw a card. Play Grim Flayer. Hold up Fatal Push, I think, rather than play an Unbridled Growth. Opponent still has 2 scales in their hand. They finally play 1. And an Ozolith. Yeah, Ratchet Bomb looking really, really good. We can dig for it with Flayer, even. Yeah, I think I'm just going to graveyard all of these and then get Lurrus back. Play Soul Guide Lantern, exile the Winding Constrictor so they can't replay it with Lurrus. And pass. So they have Hardened Scales, 2 mystery cards, and they have Lurrus in their companion zone. They did find a Ballista, which can kill Lurrus, which is no bueno. Right, looking pretty hard for a Ratchet Bomb. Not that we necessarily need one to win this game, but it would be really strong. There's a Ratchet Bomb. So I'll graveyard, top. Play Unbridled Growth. Sacrifice Unbridled Growth to draw the Ratchet Bomb. Play the Ratchet Bomb. And play another Bane of the Monsters. They're going to Fatal Push my Grim Flayer, which I think is okay. Oh, probably didn't want to do that. Now we just get to Ratchet Bomb. Nice little 4-for-1. We'll make sure to sack our Soul Guide Lantern first. Or maybe we don't. Kind of. Oh, I think our opponent thought we were sacking this on 0, but we're just putting a counter on it. And so actually, instead of sacking to draw a card, I think I'm going to sack to exile my opponent's graveyard, and then in response, blow up all the 1-drops so they can't replay them with Lurrus. Seems maybe that's a little too cute, but I think I'm in for it. Nice to have Abrupt Decay for the leap. Though they're like, this is a pretty resource and mana intensive card. They're kind of, yeah, if they draw, okay, I'll Abrupt Decay the leap in response. I don't know, they might be in it now. It'd be crazy to lose this game. But if we never draw another spell and they only draw gas, kind of bad. Like if they draw land, they play Lurrus, and we just brick, and then they replay their leap. We could lose. Not a great draw for them. And then deadweight means that even if they draw land for Lurrus, we get to kill it, trigger Chevill, win the game. And Scavenging Ooze is going to kill them next turn. So they need to draw like runner, Fatal Push, and we also need to never draw another spell the rest of this game. Oh, this is funny. It's got a bounty counter. I didn't think about that. Alright, they found themselves a chump blocker. I think they're pretty dead. Kind of interesting, the bounty counter. Alright, let's go ahead and grow up this ooze to be a 5/5 at least, just so they have to chump block it every turn. Doesn't really need to be any bigger than that. They're going to put the bounty counter on the ooze. Funny. Alright. Dead to removal spell. We'll play it. Sacrifice the growth. GG's. Hello, Berserker Bob, Titan Shifted, if you are watching on YouTube. That was match 3. I'll see you guys for match number 4. Okay, so we are on the draw for round 3. Our opponent's mulligan to 6. I'm going to keep this. I know it's only a 1-lander, but it's maybe not the best possible land. It's possible Overgrown Tomb is better because of Woodland Cemetery and Castle Locthwain. But this hand's very good. We have 2 cyclers to try to hit land drops. We have 2 1-mana interactive spells. Our opponent is mulliganing to 5. They did reveal Lurrus as their companion, because we are playing in Lurrus the Gathering these days. I do predict I will be tired of Lurrus in like a month or 2, but right now I'm having a good time and I'm trying to enjoy while I can. Maybe Scales again, maybe Rally, maybe our opponent is a fan of our list. You know what? It's just pretty bad if we hit our land drop, if we miss our land drop next turn, and playing Unbridled Growth this turn gives us 3 looks next turn. Looks like this is Rally the Ancestors, which has been popping up more and more, and I like the matchup. We've got a lot of graveyard hate. They did find a Temple Garden, but they put 3 payoffs into the graveyard, which is not ideal for them. did find a land. Let me actually get this Grim Flayer down, and this will help us find more lands. Get the ball rolling. It'll be kind of hard for our opponent to block. If we don't draw a land, we can try to put a land on top with the Flayer, and then Unbridled Growth into it, and maybe cast Thoughtseize Fatal Push. Cartel Aristocrat, huh? Well, let me attack with my Grim Flayer. If they block and sack, we'll just Fatal Push in response to the sacrifice. If they want to trade, I think we just trade. Yeah, they I think wisely decide to just trade here. And I'm going to play Chevill, which will start drawing us a card every turn with our removal spells. We just need to not get rallied or returned before we find a lantern. Before we find a lantern. Double Fiend Artisan is pretty intimidating. Pretty interesting. Okay, let's deadweight this one. We draw another non-land. I'm going to cast Thoughtseize here. If our opponent has a rally, it's not that good, but a return to the ranks is really good. Yeah, if they Fiend Artisan away the Satyr Wayfinder, I think it's just not that big a deal. Their last card... Oh, no, their last card was the Temple Garden, which we knew about. That was a big mistake to cast the Thoughtseize. Alright, well, hopefully we find a land soon. One kind of interesting thing is we can, like, target the Satyr Wayfinder with Chevill. And then they have to sack kind of in response. Our opponent also might... they might just play Lurrus this turn and replay Fiend Artisan. Definitely should have pushed the Fiend Artisan or cast Unbridled Growth instead of casting Thoughtseize. So kind of looks like Lurrus for Fiend Artisan here. And we can kill the Lurrus, which is nice. Can't kill both Fiend Artisans. Oh, they're gonna Cartel Aristocrat? I like that a lot. Cartel Aristocrat is the one getting the protection, which I think is just not that big a deal. Okay, we need to draw a land, of course, in like the top two. We've drawn a good amount of cards. We haven't run great on lands. We also have a Mox that we could draw. So let me decay this, draw a card. They'll sack to Cartel Aristocrat, yada yada yada. Scavenging Ooze is a good draw. That is a good draw. Just need to fade a payoff spell, like this turn exactly. Yeah, kind of surprised to see them get Aristocrat and not Fiend Artisan, but I haven't played the deck a ton. Maybe the sack outlet being in play is just too important. They drew another Cartel Aristocrat and a third Cartel Aristocrat. Wow, weird. So I guess we want to like put this on the Satyr Wayfinder because that's the one they're wanting to sacrifice. But I'm just gonna play Ooze, and I think I just eat both Fiend Artisans now. This plays around a return to the ranks, whereas if we wait, they can respond to an Ooze activation. They've got no cards in their hand. I'm feeling pretty good here. They don't have good attacks. That's a good draw for them. Okay, hitting our lands, feeling pretty good about that. Let's go ahead and decay the Satyr Wayfinder, draw a card. We also eating the Satyr Wayfinder does feel pretty good to me. So like whenever they rebuy it, they don't get to put more cards in their graveyard. And then in the next couple turns, we can start Lurrus plus Deadweight. I guess maybe we should have done that this turn. Not sure. I think I'm just going to put Growth here, and then eat these two and pass. Yeah, I think this matchup is pretty good. I played it once in testing, maybe twice, and I don't think I lost to it. And I guess we attack with the Ooze. This has pro black, not pro green. If they want to trade 3 Cartel Aristocrats for an Ooze, be my guest. We have a Lurrus. We're at 28. They don't have good attacks. This is going to keep chewing up their creatures and spitting them out. We have Lurrus plus Deadweight. This game feels pretty over. I think this deck is incredible. I'm really excited to stream it tomorrow. I think we're going to do well in the challenge. Maybe it was best to attack first, because now they can sack and pro green, but I don't know, this game's super over. They can't even just grind us out with Cruel Celebrants, we just have too much life from Ooze and Chevill. I'm going to get my Lantern into play. And pass. Game is super over. Sure. Just giving us more food for Ooze. Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and go to game 2. We get to bring in Deadweight 3 and 4, Tormod's Crypt, and maybe Ratchet Bomb. Bomb seems okay. Downfall seems bad. I also think they're not going to be killing our Lurrus very often, so I think we can cut this. I like the Exile on Agonizing Remorse, but 2 mana discard on the draw doesn't sound great. I kind of like cutting 2 Flayers. Ooze and Chevill seem more important. Maybe we'll play like 1 Flayer if we find room. Could maybe play 1 Call in case they bring in removal. They're not even guaranteed to have removal though. What about a Duress? Just 1 Duress for their big payoff spells. I think that is, like, we usually are dying to their big payoff spells more so than anything else. So I'll actually play 2 Duress, and if they do bring in removal, Duress can also snag that. Look at this low to the ground curve. Honestly, I love decks that just play all like 1 and 2 drops and a few 3 drops. Always been decks I gravitate towards. We can keep this. I think this card's really good in the matchup, and it is nice to have this Duress too. Our opponent mulligans 6 on the play, and you know, discard spells good against mulligans. Yada yada yada. Haunted Witness, that's fine. We'd like to find some graveyard hate, but I think we're gonna have some time. Hopefully this doesn't whiff. Why did I say anything? Oh man, and they have Priest of the Forgotten Gods, so we have to kill that. Yeah, Duress whiffing is certainly a way to lose. Hopefully they play Cartel Aristocrat instead. If they play Cartel Aristocrat instead of Priest, we're in good shape. But they should play Priest, yeah. And we have to kill it now. Otherwise they can make us sack this guy. And we drew 2 lands. Oof. Things were going so well. They get probably Godless Shrine in their hand, Mill of a Cruel Celebrant, Priest. What do we draw? That's a good draw. We'll play the Blooming Marsh while we still can, and I think we're supposed to exile the Cruel Celebrant with the Soul Guide Lantern. Really nice to have a Lantern in play against this deck, especially, you know, we've got Lurrus, and Lurrus, you know, even though we're flooding out a little bit, we can just start drawing extra cards every turn if we need to. Another Hunted Witness. I guess I'm going to put the bounty counter on the Satyr Wayfinder. No, yeah, I gotta put it on the Wayfinder because it's just so hard to kill the Aristocrat. And just sacking the Wayfinder in response to the bounty counter, that's pretty fine with me. I think that's a testament to this card's strength if that's what they're doing. Drew a Grim Flayer. Hey, you know what? I think I just want to sacrifice the Lantern, play Lurrus, replay Lantern. We do have to exile a card in our yard, which will make the Grim Flayer worse. I'll exile the Fatal Push because we have more instants in our deck than we have sorceries right now. Gonna just pro black and get in for 2. It's pretty aggressive. Kind of don't think it's gonna work. I guess they can. If they lure us, I'm just gonna sack my Lantern. Can't let them do that all day. Okay, I mean, this is fine. Like, we make them sack the Witness. They do get to replay it. Yeah, maybe that was not a good sack of the Lantern. I think it's okay. Okay, put this on the Witness in case they, you know, want to sack it again. If they sack it now, we get to exile it with the Lantern. When the Lantern ETBs. Lots of lands. Yeah, I think the Graveyard Hate is important to hold up on the Lantern, so I'm not going to draw a card. As hungry for cards as we are right now. Seems like a pretty easy block, right? Just buy our Flayer back with Lurrus next turn. Like, you always want to get Lurrus off the battlefield, too. Doesn't feel great to put the counter on the soldier token, but yeah, if they're just... I think they should just let the bounty counter be on the soldier token, but whatever. Whatever. Ooze was a great draw. Just gonna eat their Lurrus now and pass. They milled over Cartel Aristocrat and Priest of the Forgotten God. And they're going to return to the ranks. Rally the Ancestors. What does this even do? We just eat the priest, right? And then, like, this is just in play. It's not that big a deal. We don't have to sack our Lantern in response to this. Our opponent's just conceding. Okay, I had another problem recording this video. Sorry to have it happen twice in one league. We're going to do some post-commentary, finish up this video. We are playing against a Yorion deck. They revealed their Yorion. And sadly, we had to mulligan to 5, which is a beating against these Yorion decks when all they're doing is drawing cards. We did get kind of lucky to draw Soul Guide Lantern here, which is, just that recursive card advantage engine is really important in these grindy matchups. Cast Grim Flayer, our opponent censors, they pass it back to us, and I believe we draw a land. We cast Agonizing Remorse, and we took Omen of the Sea out of this hand because it's just so powerful for them to flicker with Yorion. Sacrifice the Soul Guide Lantern. We draw a land. We cast our Lurrus, and then they cast an Absorb that they drew off of either the Opt or their draw step. Pass the turn back to them, and I believe they just pass back to us. Yeah. And we draw land, and we go Call of the Death Dweller to get back Lurrus, and then replay Grim Flayer, which is really, really powerful. Our deck is just so in on Lurrus, and I hope I've showcased how important Call of the Death Dwellers is to get your Lurrus back when it's gone. Because when it's gone, it is your deck is just nowhere near as good as grinding. And as we see here, our opponent cast Elspeth Conquers Death to exile the Lurrus, and it is a beating against us. There's not a ton of great exile-based removal in Pioneer, and Elspeth Conquers Death against Lurrus is kind of weird, because Lurrus is the only spell it can target. But exiling Lurrus is very important. I decided to attack the Teferi instead of downfalling it, because we know they have Yorion, and we're going to want to downfall the Yorion. We were able to Thoughtseize a Supreme Verdict from our opponent's hand. We saw Supreme Verdict and another Teferi. They played this Teferi, they tick up, and we are attacking their graveyard for either Dig Through Time or Uro. Our opponent is very likely to have one or the other. We're able to attack their Teferi to death here. Continue. I 2 cards out of my opponent's graveyard there to hedge against Uro, but I want to hold up Downfall for a Yorion. Use that mana if I can. Our opponent, instead of casting Yorion, uses Fae of Wishes to tutor up Fumigate, and we go looking for a Thoughtseize off the top of our library with the Soul Guide Lantern post-combat, because our opponent did chump block the Grim Flayer. We did not find Thoughtseize, and our opponent is able to Fumigate and really just grind us out of the game here. We do not win this game, although I think that we could have won it if we had top decked that Thoughtseize, but this is how the Yorion control decks work. They grind you out of resources, and then they cast their Yorion, and they flicker Omen of the Sea, and it's just not super beatable in this spot after they wrath you. So they flicker their Omen, it comes back into play, and I believe I concede after drawing a land. So that was game 1 of this match. I ended up going -4 Fatal Push, -2 Deadweight, and I brought in 4 Duress and 2 Lost Legacy. Although I reevaluated for, spoilers. I reevaluated for game 3, and I played 1 Fatal Push for the ability to kill Uro, and also 1 Tormod's Crypt for Uro. We just don't have enough we don't have enough sideboard cards for this matchup, and maybe that's a problem, but a lot of the sideboard cards you'd want to play are not cards that work with Lurrus. They're like Tireless Tracker, Questing Beast, Davriel. So that's going to be something to reconsider, but let's go ahead and showcase game 2, and then game 3. We are fortunate enough to be on the play for this game, although we have to take a mulligan again. I put back Chevill because it's also really bad in the matchup. Ideally we could cut the Fatal Pushes, the Deadweights, and the Chevills, but sadly I just don't think that there's room in the sideboard for, what is that, 9 cards for the blue-white control matchup. Like, we have the Duresses, and there's some good overlap there. But I'm not sure. Maybe we play like Glint Sleeve Siphoner in the sideboard. That could be kind of interesting. Like bring in the Siphoners for the matchup where Chevill is bad. Just an idea I'm having live right now. So we're ripping our opponent's hand apart with Duresses and we get to resolve Lurrus with Grim Flayer in play. I think this is the exact kind of start that we need to have to win this matchup. Just go, discard spell, Grim Flayer, Lurrus, get value with Lurrus. Seems very important. We did see that our opponent had a Wrath in their hand, I believe. No, sorry, they had Elspeth Conquers Death in their hand that they were hoping to find their 5th land for. Yeah, there we go. And we were able to find a discard spell before they found their 5th land for Elspeth Conquers Death. And then we cast a Grim Flayer from the graveyard, cast a Grim Flayer from our hand, and said, opponent, top deck a Wrath or lose the game. And they decided to lose the game instead. So that was game 2. Let's go ahead and showcase game 3 and see if we trophy. Right, on the draw for game 3, we have another hand that we have to mulligan, and we've got an admittedly kind of weak 6-card hand with no turn 1 discard spell, no turn 2 threat. I do think that mulliganing to 5 in this matchup is brutal, and we do have Unbridled Growth and, 2 draw steps to try to find at least a 2-drop to play on turn 2. Unfortunately, the Grim Flayer was just 1 card too deep, and we have to play it on turn 3, which puts us at just a huge tempo disadvantage. The Grim Flayer does connect, which is, was certainly heartening to see. And I go ahead and cast Lurrus pretty aggressively here, because I don't mind if it dies so much, because we do have, or if it gets countered, because we have Call of the Death Dwellers, and I wanted to be able to get a card out of it this turn with Unbridled Growth. And if our opponent Wraths next turn, we can call and get back Grim Flayer, which is pretty nice. And I do believe my opponent does Wrath this turn. Yes, they do. Go ahead and draw my card with Growth, call, put Lurrus into play, replay Grim Flayer, pass back to my opponent, who has a 2nd copy of Supreme Verdict, which is really unfortunate. We duress away an opponent's Teferi, but we also saw that they had Opt and Sphinx's Revelation in their hand, which was terrifying. We also saw Fae of Wishes, but we couldn't have taken it with Duress because of the fact that Fae of Wishes is a creature. They go ahead and wish up a Rest in Peace, which is kind of weird, I think. Especially because the Lurrus is already gone. So, we just go ahead and draw a card with Castle, get in there. They Teferi and minus on the Scavenging Ooze, which is really weird. We draw another land, we Hero's Downfall the Teferi, we pass the turn. And then they draw a 2nd copy of Omen of the Sea, and then they can flicker with Urion, and we really can't win from this point because they've got 5 points of power in the air, and we've got nothing going on. But that was the league. I'm, again, sorry that 2 of the matches, the recording messed up. Fingers crossed that won't be so much of a problem in the future, but if you like the deck, you like the video, hope you guys hit the subscribe button, follow me over on twitch.tv/Aspiringspike, and maybe say hi in tomorrow's Pioneer Challenge stream. But until next time, I've been Aspiring Spike. Hope you guys learned something. Hope you have a good day. Bye.